Hi, we're going to take a look at the second example on a version of the homework that deals with absolute values and negative numbers. So problem number 2 right here says, what is the absolute value of a negative 54 plus 16? All right. So we've got to look at this in a couple of different ways. Well, first things first, we've got to take negative 54 plus 16. We've got to figure out what that is. So what we have to look at, negative 54 plus 16. So we have two numbers with different signs. So if you have two numbers with different signs, you're going to be subtracting the two numbers. So we're going to do this like we did maybe way back when, doing the old-fashioned subtraction by hand. Now, this old-fashioned subtraction by hand, we always, regardless of the signs, we always have the larger number on top and the smaller number on the bottom. So in this particular case, we would have 54 on top minus 16. Okay, this is the old-fashioned subtraction algorithm that we're familiar with from elementary school. So 6 cannot be subtracted from 4, so we're going to have to borrow. So when we borrow from the 5, we have a 4 left over, and up here we have a 14. So now 14 minus 6, well, that gets us an 8. And then a 4 minus 1, well, that gets us a 3. Okay, now, since the larger number here is negative, the smaller number here is positive, we take the sign of the larger number. So this would be a negative 38. Okay, now, here's the trick. Since we're dealing with absolute values, anytime you take the absolute value of any number, it's always going to turn positive. The reason is, the definition of absolute value simply means the distance away from 0. We can never measure distance as a negative number. You can't measure the distance between Louisville to DC in negative amount of miles. It's always going to be a positive number. Absolute value just simply measures distance. So if this is a little confusing to you, that's understandable because we're using the subtraction that we remember in elementary school to signs with different numbers. Okay, I can see how that can be a little confusing. However, if you take your old-fashioned calculator and if you do a negative 54, at least on mine, I have to do 54 and then that minus sign, plus 16. Well, I get a negative 38. Well, that's what we got right here. So, and then a negative 38, when you take the absolute value of that, well, that would be a positive 38. So two different ways to look at it, but remember, you can still do the subtraction that you did in elementary school. You just have to know that you have to take the sign of the larger number. Now, if this was a positive 54 and this was a minus 16, then your answer would be the absolute value of a positive 38. Okay? Remember, take the sign of the larger number.